Assalamu alaikum. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم ربنا وجعلنا مسلمين لك ومن ذرياتنا أمة مسلمة لك وارنا مناسكنا وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for coming today. And I'd like to thank the Pakistan Society for Training and Development for asking me to address all of you. As some of you may know, I'm in the middle of some treatment. I'm being cured of stage 4 cancer. It's a cancer that has metastasized. That means it has spread. And at first they gave me 0% chance of survival over the next 5 years. Now it's up to 10%. And I'm of course hoping to take it up to 90 and then 100%. Which is why I'm here, because it has given me, this whole cancer thing has given me a lot of opportunity to reflect on some things that are very dear to my heart. Things like life and death and happiness and family and financial security and so forth. And one of the things that I've realized in this whole illness area is we badly need leadership. And not just leadership outside of us, but leadership inside of us, self-leadership. And that's really what I like to talk about as the skill for the future. I was told by PSTD that we should focus more on what are the skills that need to be put in us or imbibed to survive the 21st century, to survive the 2016s is where we are at, and then the 2020s and the 2030s and the 2040s, and hopefully have a much, much better world than it promises right now to be. So, what are we going to talk about? This is a triangle, and the whole game of leadership revolves around this triangle. This is the power that I possess, or that you possess, or anybody else possesses. It can be money, knowledge, love, happiness, influence, the ability to get things done. This is called power. And what we need in leadership is we need people who buy into that idea of power. In other words, they accept you. It's acceptance. If you want anything done by leaders, if you need anything done, if you need anything done by other people, they need to accept what you're doing first. And then, of course, there is the leader's self-interest. If you're going to be in leadership, you can only get one of two of those sides. You have to sacrifice the third side. So if you want power and self-interest, you have to sacrifice the buy-in. If you want power and buy-in, you have to sacrifice the self-interest. And most importantly, if you want your self-interest and buy-in, you've got to share powers with others. That means you've got to empower others. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about how do we make the best selection over here, and why is it so difficult to put others' interest first? Why is it so difficult to put your interest right now on the back burner? And the biggest obstacle is we don't trust this process called life. We want to intervene all the time. We don't give enough chances to the universal forces that are at work. So how do we make that distinction? Whether my action is determined by myself, or is this a guided, predetermined action by the universal forces that are at work that are far greater than you or I? So let's make it simple. If we just focus on three areas, the three MCs, managing culture, managing change, and managing commitment, what are we going to be left with? Is there anything else worthwhile left to do after we have managed these three MCs? Let's take a look. When we talk about managing culture, let's forget about culture. Let's forget about all the scholarship that's out there. Let's do a mental experiment and say to ourselves, we just need one dimension on culture, and that is, how do I create a high trust culture? That's the central issue. And why is it a central issue? Because the absence of trust leads to breakdown, leads to deconstruction, leads to destruction, it leads to disintegrity, it leads to disintegration. And it leads to three forces coming in when all this is happening: fear, greed, and an us versus them mentality, which starts conflicts that can never be resolved. We demonize people, we hurt people, we commit violence on each other. And what's really happening is we're creating leaks in the trust bucket. And there are 4 leaks in the trust bucket: closure, disrespect, slow resolution of situations, and false promises. Let's take a look at how we're going to handle that. So why is trust so central? Why is it so important in the 3 MCs that we talked about? Managing trust. We create a high trust culture by managing culture. Why is that so central? Well, for one thing, our happiness, our ability to compete, our ability to sustain ourselves, our ability to survive, they're all determined on by the amount of trust that we can create in an environment. And why do I say that? Because trust does not build randomly. Trust has to be invested in. Trust has to be worked upon. And for that, we need to change our language. We need to change the language of machines and start speaking the language of humans. We're speaking too much about processes and structures and hierarchies and systems and cycles, and we're not saying enough about meaning and inspiration and connection and purpose and love. And those are the things that build trust. If you have systems that work really well, you have a trust that's based on the process and the system. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be infecting the human beings. It really doesn't mean that just because you trust, you believe in a process, that there's an election process and the person that you've hired is the best, the person that you've elected is the best person. It's okay if it's not the best person, as long as the system works. Well, that is not what I mean about when I talk about trust. Trust that I talk about is, do I trust you as a human being? And what would that trust model look like if I was to trust you as a human being and if you were to trust me as a human being? Well, we both need to be very good at closure. When the mind starts to wander and wonder, what's going to happen now? Distrust creeps in, and fear, greed, and the us versus them mentality creeps in. So we need to bring in all the details. We need to make ourselves transparent to people. We need to bring closure to all our discussions so that person who walks away from us is not wondering and wondering about what am I going to do next. That person knows very clearly what am I going to do. Make only true promises. The worst thing we can do for trust is to make a promise we don't intend to keep. So no false promises. Number 3, avoid abuse. Avoid language that belittles people. Raise people's status. Appeal to their dignity. Appeal to their humanity. And hold them up as great people. Resolve situations in a very speedy manner. Don't keep things lingering. Don't postpone. Something has to be done, take a decision. If you're unable to take a decision, give it to somebody who can take a decision. But take decisions. And finally, respect. Each one of us are God's vice regents on this planet. Is this the way we treat vice regents? No, there is something that's gone culturally awry in our heads, where we break people down, people who have a lot of money or who have a lot of knowledge, we give them a lot of respect. People who are poor, we disrespect them. People who serve us, we disrespect them. People who serve us in restaurants, in companies, and in our homes, we call them servants. We need to respect them. And to do all that, you got to take responsibility for who you are. We have to stop playing the role of the victim, that we are all victims of our environment. We've got to stop playing the role of, that others are villains and who are working against us. We've got to stop uh, trying to be helpless and try and shift the burden of responsibility on someone else. If you really want to be a leader and somehow you manage to acquire a lot of power, and in order to exercise that power, you need a lot of buy-in. Give up your self-interest and think about the greater interest. Because the more the chances of fulfilling the greater interest, the more there are chances of you fulfilling your self-interest. So we got to take a long-term view of this game. And you have to trust the leadership process. Why is it that I'm realizing this and you're not? Because I am facing the prospect of death. And it doesn't frighten me. And because the fear has gone, I started taking some hard looks at my beliefs, at my mental constructs, at what am I saying in my head to myself. And I've had a lot of chats with myself and realized that what I need to do is to help you become fantastic leaders. And how do we do that? Focusing on the 3 MCs. Manage culture, bring about a high trust culture, manage change, which is what we're going to talk about, and manage commitment. A few years ago, I moved to Hawaii. And what was it that was so good about Hawaii? You guessed it, surfing. Body surfing, board surfing, long board surfing, short board surfing. It's a lot of surfing that happens in Hawaii. But what did I like the most about surfing is what I learned about life from surfing. What is surfing? You paddle out, then the waves start to come in. When they're coming in, you cannot predict what kind of a wave it's going to be. A big wave, a small wave, a rough wave, break early, break late, you don't know. But you take a gamble. You guess that now a good wave is coming. So you have to start paddling really furiously. If you paddle out too far in front, the wave will crash over you. If you paddle out too slow, the wave will go by you and leave you behind. Change is much the same way. A lot of waves of changes are coming, wave after wave after wave. And we need to learn to catch the right waves. And if you're on the wave that's slowing down, we need to jump out. That's how dolphins cover huge swaths of water and land and long distances over water. How do they do that? They figure out there's a wave that's going and they jump into that wave and they kind of wriggle themselves a little bit, ride the wave, and the wave starts to die down, they jump out of the water and catch another wave and catch another wave and catch another wave. It's learning. That dolphin is learning which wave is going down and which wave is coming up. And it gambles and it jumps. If it catches the wrong wave, it'll jump out of that wave. It won't go down with the wave that's not going anyplace. So it's always going to jump out and catch the new wave. And how do we do that? We do that by anticipating change. And how do we anticipate change? We need to create ways where we learn something, then we quickly unlearn it, and we relearn something new. And the minute we keep doing that, we become what's known as a learning organization. And what's the characteristic of a learning organization? We've got 2 types of learning. There's a single loop learning and there's a double loop learning. The single loop learning is where you follow checklists, where you follow a procedure, a process. And after a while, we need to suspend that. We need to stop doing that work and sit around and say, why are we doing this? Why do we have all the lights on in this room? Why can't we do with fewer lights? And you start challenging all the assumptions. You start questioning everything that's going on. And when we question what's going on, we're creating double loops and multiple loops in our head. And of course, what that will do is lead you to a lot of conversations, some of which are going to be, how do I say this diplomatically? Some of those conversations are going to be very sensitive, about sensitive matters, like your boss's salary, or the CEO's salary, or the upcoming dividend, or the strategies that you've all created in your organizations. The less you can talk about sacred cows, the less learning will take place in that organization. So we need to be able to talk about everything and have complete transparency about what's going on and to trust each other. We saw the trust bucket, now we come down to the learning bucket. We need the double loop learning and no sacred cows. That means what we need to do is orient everybody. You know, we talk about like-minded. Like-minded doesn't mean we all think alike. Like-minded means that we're all committed to the ideals of leadership, which is to create trust, to create learning organizations, and to manage commitment by tapping into the spirit of volunteerism. And we're going to look at that in a bit. But right now, let's look at what's commitment all about. Well, we got to ignore the jackass theory of motivation, reward and punishment. We replace it with the spirit of volunteerism. Each one of us, every human is born with that love to give to others. How do we tap into that love? Why aren't we tapping into that love at work? Why aren't we tapping into that love in schools? Why is it all about curriculums and KPIs and the bell curve and everything else? Well, what do we replace all that greed and all that haphazard way of motivating people? How do we replace all of it? Very simple. By helping and caring for each other. By activism, putting yourself out there, advocacy, by going out and talking about issues that are important rather than going home and watching television, and of course, dreaming. Always dreaming. Right now I'm dreaming of heaven. Right now you could be dreaming about your new home or blissful marital life or a beautiful car or a nice work environment or all of them. So we need to keep dreaming. But in order for those dreams to become realities, we need to be free. We need to free ourselves from the clutches we have put ourselves into. So we need to start looking at every action we take as a choice, as an autonomous choice. You are free to make that choice. You're doing it because you're willing and you want to do it. And you're qualified to doing so. And we need to redefine volunteerism. Volunteerism is not just unpaid labor. Volunteerism is a step for fulfillment. It's a step for pleasure. It's a step towards enjoyment. And what we've figured out is there is a certain point of revenue or capital that you need in your life. And surprisingly, it's not a lot to be happy. It's not a lot to prevent dissatisfaction in you. So what we're going to have is, oh, I've gone on too long.
Yeah, it's 18:30.
Okay, that's
But-
not bad.
Yeah, so
Okay.
just step back.
I'm going to jump
Yep.
through this one. Forget that one. We're going to start from here. Okay.
Okay.
So that slide, we just have to delete that. Ready?
Yep.
3, 2, 1, 0. So, in order for us to take voluntary action, that means we should want to take that action. In order for us to want to take that action, that means we should be free to take that action. So what does freedom mean? When I say you are free, what does that mean? That means that we are free to do the type of work we want to do. We are free from financial blackmail. We are free from emotional blackmail. We are free to think our own thoughts and make up our own minds and assess our own situations. Real freedom means you're free when you speak the truth. If you're finding you're not speaking the truth, then you're not that free. You're free to live according to your own personal ethics. You are free to shape your life around you and around your sense of purpose. You're free to structure your own time. It's your life, it's your time. Of course, it gets really hard. It gets really difficult if you think you're not free. So, look at these 3 chairs. This chair is sitting with a very smart, intelligent, attractive human being of either sex. And let's call this specimen of a human being trust. This is change. Change is sitting here. It's irrevocable. It's coming. It's eating us up. It's putting us in a state of shock. And this is commitment. Our ability is determined by our commitment. How do they interplay with each other? If I'm a leader, I'm going to create a high trust organization and avoiding the four leaks in the trust bucket. If I'm a leader, I'm going to help people learn by challenging assumptions, by breaking down barriers, by going into double loop learning. And if I'm a leader, I'm going to go into just focusing on people's commitment, their real commitment. What are they free to do? What is it they want to do? Empower them and help them become what they want to become. Help them decide what it is they want out of their lives, and then help them get it for themselves rather than giving those attributes to them. So manage culture, manage change, manage commitment. Do this by building high trust. Do that by building double loop organizations that have double loop learnings going on in them, breaking down barriers, and to tap into the spirit of volunteerism. ربنا الغفور شكور ربنا تقبل دعاء ربي زدني علما ربنا إننا منا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وقنا عذاب النار. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed being here in spirit and in videotape. Thank you very much.